more time, we can just have a discussion on that. Let's see. Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Acha, I'm not going into the full screen also because I can go also. না আমি time টা দেখতে পাবো না আবার। আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে। So, integrated energy policy, what do you mean? From the name itself, it's quite obvious. Always remember that any policy issue, we all go on criticizing policy anytime. It's not our fault because when the policy is activated, then there are many issues. Initially, there can be something wrong in the policy that can be corrected later on, or many times it happens there is a main difficulty is in the actual implementation of the policy. Because, for example, most of the you are also oral adult, so rather we should not avoid these discussions also whenever we think about the engineering solution. Whenever in most of the cases you find out that there is some mutual blaming in the federal structure, at least in our state, that any policy that has been adopted is not being properly followed by any of the central government or state government. So that means I'm not blaming whether anybody is right or anybody is wrong. What I'm informing that the policy has got two issues. One is the making a good policy, and second part is the implementation of that policy. Generally, the policy who make it, they don't. I mean, they are not involved in the po- policy implementation. So, in between, what happens actually in this process, the success or failure of a policy also has to be, or rather, not the full failure, we call it amendment, or the revision of policies has to be done regularly on the basis of feedback from the implementation stage. Now, currently, as you are all aware, that the national education policy is going on to be implemented, and in news clips, whether it is electronic media or it is print media, you can always find that some news are coming up continuously in the implementation stage. So the policy has been already released, and it was chaired by Dr. Kosturi Rangan, who was the ISRO chairman sometimes, and he had several programs. I was personally there in his programs also, where he has clearly explained the philosophy of that particular policy. It is mostly publicly declared, announced policy taken from the existing US education policy, United States. So, whether somebody will like it or not, that's a different issue. Then after implementation, whether it will actually be better or not, that's different. But you can find out why I'm telling with respect to this, because this is you are now currently seeing. So integrated energy policy also, in relevance to that, you can find out how it is relevant issues. I mean, say in education policies, the interesting part is, as any new policy will be implemented, nobody knows whether it is will be good or bad. But you are changing existing system means the people who are habituated to these systems, mostly not the students but the teachers or faculty members or infrastructures, they will have a general resistance to it. General resistance, I'm not telling it may be majority, it may not be majority, maybe minority also. So the people usually habituated to a particular practice, they don't want to change. So any policy, new policy as it comes, implementation also becomes a challenge. And for the students also, whether it will be good or bad, that need some stipulated period to examine. Because if the students come out, I say anytime entry anytime exit, that is another policy. Credit transfer means whatever credits one of the students done in one university, he or she can carry it to another university. The problem is whether these are a good concept, but whether it is implementable infrastructure is there in our country at different locations, that's also another issue. Because though the policy may be very good, but the infrastructure, if it is not enough, then obviously there will be some, I mean, some sort of chaos will be created. I'm giving this example just because whenever we are discussing about policies, don't think that this will be 100% perfect. But with respect to integrated energy policy, what do we mean? In fact, this is also a continuously evolving issue. Continuously evolving means energy is undoubtedly, out of the basic needs of the human beings, is changing its perspective very fast. For example, the basic requirement of the three, as we all know, has been identified as food, clothes, and shelter. Interestingly, out of these three needs, if you look into that, somehow or other, all the energy are, I mean, all these three sectors need some energy input. In fact, that's why the food, water, energy nexus is also another term. So, production of food needs energy. Production of, I mean, clothes also needs energy, incidentally, though it does not have that much nexus of very high consumption. And production of shelter. Shelter doesn't mean making a house without any electricity or power supply. So, automatically, not only power supply, but also the cooking gas supply, these things are needed. So, obviously, any food, water, shelter increase will always have an implications implicitly on the energy increase, energy demand increase. So what is happening here we are studying energy conservation, but why I take this particular slide specifically in the class is, don't think that energy conservation is an independent issue to handle. Only we are taking up the issues related to energy conservation, but at national level all these are very integrated plan where one of the sector is energy conservation, completely under the leadership of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, BE. So we have, that the out of those, I mean, countries in the all countries in the world, I mean, previously India and China, I don't know currently the situation of China after this COVID and etc etc, we have a targeted economic growth. In fact, the other countries comparatively declared developed countries, but India is also a G20 member now. So it is also a quite advanced country as it is considered. But interestingly, the economic growth of 8 to 10% is not very common in most of the advanced countries, including the European or the other US, etc. So, what is happening? We have to maintain this economic growth in spite of large scale poverty. That's the serious challenge, because we cannot neglect the poverty and we cannot just meet up our targeted growth of 8 to 10%. And honestly speaking, here many people complain that though India has declared 100% literacy, 100% electricity connections to villages, etc., this has actually not been done. This is sometimes we have to take it as a strategic declaration. It happens because whenever you are going to declare something, then perfectly it has been done or not, that evaluation will be done by different people in different way. But there is some international implications of those government declaration. I'm not telling at all that government should tell lies, but putting one electricity connection to a particular village as a sample point connections means it's a pole, and if the distribution is not yet completed to individual houses, there may be some socio-political issues. Then government may take that particular announcement that this village is electrified, because those things may not be within the control of the central government. That may be the under the purview of the local government. They may or may not cooperate due to valid reason, due to political reason, whatever it may be. So that's why what I'm telling, that sometimes we go on criticizing the policy outputs and the policy government declaration that it's not perfect, it's not true. There are certain degrees of truth which has to be accepted as the successful policy implementation, and it's very subjective. I'm telling you, in many of the meetings I have been at the state or national level, I have found out that people have, for the same output, people have different opinion, and it will happen because there is nothing metrics like numerical value, and it's not very easy and straightforward. Anyway, so with respect to that, the economic growth of 8 to 10% and large poverty against that of having this economic growth is the greatest challenge of India. And interestingly, these are, India is at least surviving even after COVID. There is no doubt about it. Whatever maybe the criticism we do, it's a very successful challenge the India has made it. Then economic growth target including poverty alleviation needs increase of energy supply. As I have mentioned, that all the basic needs are actually connected to somehow energy supply. That means if more people have to have electricity, basic needs access, then automatically they will ask for more and more energy access. Energy access is not only in the form of electricity, that's the best form of access, or rather the highest form of access. But as you know, that we need the one of the very important energy supply at least in our country, is the cooking gas supply. And that cooking gas supply has got a substantial transformation with respect to large population, because previously the cooking gas was subsidized. You see how interestingly it has been changed. Cooking gas was subsidized to everybody, just like Jadavpur University tuition fees, whether the people is able or not to buy it. So what happens for individually, whenever it goes from say to 200 rupees to 1000 rupees, 800 rupees increase, then media even also go on campaigning that it's very much a problem for the all the middle class people. They try to highlight, but the interesting part is the percentage of middle class people and who cannot afford this money, that is also questionable. Undoubtedly, if it could have been at lower price, it's better. But from putting government subsidy for keeping it lower price, then obviously the government has lesser money in investing other places and in infrastructure development, which is more important responsibility rather than providing subsidy to the cooking gas to the people who can buy it. But then again, the question can comes up in the other way: if the government is doing proper utilizations of the money that is coming out of these subsidy reduction. So criticism can be either way. But interesting part is the if we can take that particular issue of increase of energy supply, and we have successfully made it, this cooking gas supply has now reached to many poor people at very remote villages. This is a fact. At almost no price or very little price costing. So there is a good effort, and the money comes from actually unsubsidized cooking gas to the people who can afford to buy it. So this is a policy which can be criticized, which can be accepted either way. And then, with respect to these strategies of developing infrastructure with respect to more and more people coming under this supply chain, petrol and diesel has got another interesting development. I'm just telling you the stories just to correlate. Petrol and diesel, you know that the crude oil is imported mostly from the Saudi Arabia and many other countries, including Iran. Iran has certain problem with respect to US sanctions, and that's why government has to made a very good political relations or diplomatic relations with respect to Middle East countries. It's their business. They have got a big market in India, but still, due to political reason like Ramadan war, if they stop supplying the energy, I mean the sorry oil to India, then India will be in a very vulnerable situation. Their entire transport system will stop. So but the actual process of the diesel and the petrol supply, with respect to that, the government imports the crude oil. Always the oil is imported in the own country in the crude oil form, because the those who are exporting oil, they don't take that particular responsibility of refining those things for, I mean, exporting, because that's the cost, not a cost effective option. They simply sell their crude oil. So the crude oil then needs refinery. India has enough of refinery now, and then there are different locations, and those there we have in West Bengal one refinery at Holdia also. So there the, I mean the it is getting converted into petrol diesel. So obviously there is a price, I should not tell it price, cost enhancement after the crude oil import. But even that cost assessment currently does not reflect the price. There is a distinct difference between cost and price significantly in the petrol and diesel. And there lies the, I mean, some political issues, because there are some taxes imposed on those petrol and diesel cost on top of that cost to make the price. So the actual cost maybe, I'm just taking, I don't know the exact value, maybe 30 rupees, but maybe some taxes imposed by the both the governments, and then it is coming around some 100 plus. So more than the actual cost, double is the price which is sold in the market in petrol and diesel. The question is raised, can be raised: is it rational? The question is again answered in that way of LPG gas also. Unless you earn the money from here, then obviously the petrol diesel is such two things we have to buy. Nobody can avoid it, I mean, in different forms. So obviously government has a assured money that can come to the government revenue, and then they can invest that money to other fields. But there is a big debate in petrol, but the political leaders are not raising that debates very high also, because every state has got, it is not coming under GST. GST means what? State and central taxes will be same. But if it comes under that, then state cannot impose taxes on the petrol and diesel prices of its own choice, and that creates a big problem for the some of the states. I don't know. I'm not mentioning about my state because that may be a sensitive issue. But actually, when price increases, central government is blamed. But we have to see that how much percentage of tax the central government is taking out of it, and how much percentage of tax the state government is taking. So there is a fallacy. But interestingly, though it was repeatedly discussed that central government, at least they have offered, it should come under GST, at least whatever I have seen in media. But many state governments, not many, several state governments are not willing to accept that particular proposition. So there are issues related to energy, integrated energy policy. The politics cannot be avoided. So after this, the climate change issue came as a very big problem, because the climate change, whatever all these stories I am telling, all are related to internal governance. Internal governance means decision has to be taken internally, effect will also be internal, whatever the resistance and implementations issues, etc., regulations, all within the internally within the country. But unfortunately, whenever it comes to climate change, as we have discussed earlier several times, that it, whatever may be the source of climate change, effect is global. So there is international negotiation to handle or mitigate this thing, not as a single country agenda, but as a, almost all the countries are now in the COP meeting. So it has become so important. That's why the government need a lot of large reform, because our coal based power plants, we, whether we will able to survive our coal based power plants is not within our hand now, though we are completely independent sovereign country. But still, if there are some international pressure, somehow it is found that it is only responsible for the global climate change, or rather majority of responsibility goes on those, then the other countries will put the diplomatic pressure on India, and they can just create sanctions and export debarring and other things. So obviously, climate change, you go on fighting in a political way, just telling per capita carbon emissions, earlier emissions, all these reasons, and you make your own way of presenting the. I mean, you're rather making your face in the international meeting, but somehow you have to get your interest as a resolution of the COP meeting in climate change. Other things you need not to convince the international community. You can decide of your own. So that's why the climate change has undoubtedly needed some large reform at the national energy sector. I mean, not independently. It is under the pressure of the regulations of the international community. So, obviously, I mean, when we were the students, there was no ministry named as climate change. But currently, the Ministry of Environment is also always includes the climate change. And in last Indian Chamber of Commerce, that minister actually came, Bhupinder Jadhav. And incidentally, I was the person who introduced that subject. There is interesting, central government has clubbed environment, climate, and also employment. And the topic was the green jobs opportunity in Eastern India, on which the Honorable Minister was answering the questions of the media. And my job was just to introduce the subject, why this is called green jobs. So, green jobs is a classified rather terminology coming up with respect to this energy transition, because there is energy transition towards from the conventional energy to the so-called clean energy, sustainable energy, what you call, but all those doesn't mean same academically at least. So my idea was basically how these green jobs are defined, and then what are the government initiatives, and there are several government initiatives with respect to, I mean, new policy implementation in the energy sector, and based on that, the not only the energy, environment is also coupled in that particular case, and then based on these new policies implementation, lots of opportunities of jobs are coming up. And then how this youth people, generation can be converted to those jobs rather than getting involved into older conventional systems, sometimes it needs a training also. So the renewable systems are coming up, and distributed renewable, if it comes up, then a lot of people will be required to maintain and operate those systems depending on the type of renewable. If it is solar connected to battery, limited people. But if it is wind, obviously there are connected people to be trained in that particular repairing and maintenance and other issues, maybe a little bit more. And if it becomes some other type of renewables, a biomass based system, then obviously supplying biomass chain is the supply chain of biomass management of supply chain of biomass is also another important issue which has to be involved, especially in the village. The local population has to be involved in the supply of biomass systems. So, depending on this type of transformation from the so-called, if we call it dirty energy to the clean energy, the green jobs definitions are also defined. So, as you can understand, that then climate change and environment has become rather integrated, and in some cases, strategically government mixes of other sectors. Our government, central government, maybe has given priority to the job creation with respect to this transformation. That's why if you just open, I forgot all his portfolio, but Mr. Bhupinda Jadhav is a very important minister in Central Union Ministry where he has got very important portfolios altogether. Energy, environment, climate, three are automatically there. This is quite expected. But the other things like employment and other things, I just recall faintly there are some other portfolios also. So that means government has thought that these should be together within the leadership of one person, just because to take the decision uniformly in an integrated way by resolving the conflicts between these sections. Because if in the name of environment, if you move in a particular direction where the jobs of the youth gets reduced, it's not also desired. So based on that, we have to make some options for this. So that's why the climate change, international regulations, and the large scale reform of national energy sector that is required is obviously, I mean, very much important now with respect to the integrated energy policy. And the governance is structured under the different ministries. You see, these ministries all are related to energy sector, petroleum and natural gas. In fact, this is a separate ministry, means they have got their separate decision, separate policy, separate implementation strategy. But obviously, the Prime Minister's office and the inter-ministry must be in coordination so that the one of the ministry implementation cannot be the hindrance for the other. In fact, I know personally when Partha Bhattacharya was the chairman of Coal India, the coal ministry had a very serious, I mean, confrontation with the Ministry of Environment. Why? I mean, there was a serious discussion. Partha Bhattacharya, we are in personal relations, rather, we know each other very closely. The issue arises, most of the coal mines, find out later, is within deep forest or in highly populated area. So whenever it comes to the highly populated area, one of the example maybe Devcha Pachani in West Bengal also, then the problem crisis is something different type, because in that case it will be more social problem than environmental problem. But whenever a coal mines is say discovered in a deep forest in a particular state, maybe Madhya Pradesh or something like that, where the lot of forest area are there, then Ministry of Environment will put an objection. You cannot extract that coal because that will destroy your our forest or rather greenery. So interestingly, there was a debate whether we can lose that much coal reserve just because of the environment for a country like India. And this is called the coordination between different ministries. Always there will be some confronting interest. And Mr. Bhattacharya was repeatedly telling that there should be an integrated ministry of combining the environment and the coal ministry. But whether that's also feasible or not, that you have to think of. I mean, he was not claiming like that. I'm not telling that he's telling that much bogus, because he's very intelligent and very rational person. And rather, I respect him for his leadership. But he was telling there should be an inter-ministry committee so that this conflict should be resolved. These two ministries cannot be mixed up. Environment and coal cannot get mixed up together. Then the expertise area is also different. But there must be interministerial coordination, what was his, I would rather promoted idea, so that these type of confrontation can be resolved in a single window system. So petroleum and natural gas, as you know, it's a separate ministry because there are some import issue, there are some refineries, and then planning for the future, and then substitution of fuels, etc. Everything is involved in this, so it's a different ministry. Coal we have to have. Petroleum, natural gas, they're all together. But coal is a completely different ministry in India just because coal is a resource in our country itself. So we need to have a proper planning for using coal. And undoubtedly, the using coal has got an associated challenge with respect to the environment, climate change. So the coal ministry always has to work in coordination with the environment ministry that I was referring to, Mr. Bhattacharya's expectations, or as he was also referring to that. Interestingly, the Indian Power Ministry is now confined, or rather covering only the conventional power and large scale hydropower. Why large scale? Because large scale hydropower needs uprooting of people for the dam and the reservoir preparations and other things. So initially it was considered to coming under the renewable energy section, but now it is not considered to be a part of the renewable energy. It's completely coming under the Ministry of Power. So conventional coal-based power and the large scale hydropower are within the coverage of the Ministry of Power. But please note that Ministry of Power doesn't mean all power sources, because you know that there are the, you can find out later on, new and renewable energy, which is called MNRE, Ministry of new most probably new and renewable energies, etc. is the ministry name. So what is the idea is the power ministry and the renewable energy ministry, they both look into the production of power. One is confined within two sectors, coal based and large hydro. The small hydro of the order of kilowatt, where you don't need any dam, because in many hilly areas there are certain streams which has continuous flow of water even throughout the year. In most of the cases it's not throughout the year, but in many cases it's throughout the year. In fact, that's the source of energy in the country Norway, I know personally, because Norway, even in winter when there is snow formed, there are certain flow of water below that. So continuously they can have certain water flow, and that makes their 90%, more than 90% of their power generation by small hydro plants, not even large hydro plants. And that's there, all the problems are solved because they know that their renewable energy and their carbon emissions is almost zero. And now they have switched over to even the electricity based vehicles completely, most probably by 2024. So depending on the resources that has to be decided, your ministerial policy, etc. Then atomic energy is sorry, water resources also coming within the, I mean, energy sector, because the water resources energy are closely connected with respect to the associated energy issues. So that's why in integrated energy policy, the water resource has to be combined with the other policy planning. Atomic energy is something which all of you know, it's an independent area, but still atomic energy growth is not that much. It's not their fault, just because the public acceptance is not that strong. In any state, if the central government has some planning of installing a new plant, then there may be some issues raised by the local people, because in general people have non acceptance with respect to atomic energy. But it's a separate ministry, and interestingly that ministry is not always, I'm not very sure to just check it whether atomic energy is under, yes, yeah, DA, yeah, Department of Atomic Energy, it is a separate ministry. And then new and renewable energy, transport is another sector which is related to the energy, and railways is independent, which is a big entity which needs a separate minister, but still railway has substantial energy consumption. And under the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, railway is considered to be a single industry which needs regular energy efficiency measurement. But energy policy has issues involving several ministries. That's why this I'm discussing is, the whenever you are talking about energy conservation, you are not looking into the Ministry of Coal, you are not looking into the Ministry of say water resources, because the subject of energy conservation is rather limited with respect to a specific objective of reducing the energy intensity of the country. And there the definition is your per unit GDP, what is the energy consumption. So, but all these ministries actually has to work together, either from energy conservation viewpoint, partially, but more perspective is energy conservation is minor there with respect to international pressure on the climate change issue, and also the integrated planning required for the growth, meeting the growth, economic growth, and simultaneously addressing the poverty of the Indian people. So this is the need, as I have discussed. I don't think you need it in text. This is just like storytelling mode. So integrated energy policy means you have to take the actions integrating all these issues, where some part will go to energy conservation, some part may go to coal usage principle for future, some part may go to the, the petroleum import policy, some part may go to the new atomic energy installations, because each has got a linked effect on the other. And in fact, more atomic energy installation may cause better energy conservation, because generally any alternative energy sources means we have lesser pressure on the fossil fuel based systems, and overall efficiency also improves. So the few major initiatives with respect to this integrated energy policy, as you can see, that promoting energy efficiency and conservation, that means the R&D, arranging funds, these are the important issue, and government has made it. Not up to the satisfaction maybe, because the whenever there is the arranging of funds issue come, then a lot of issues are also there. So they have to take with a balancing with every sectors of need. But we have a distinct policy with respect to different ministries in the energy and environment sector. But undoubtedly there are certain issues related to conflicting interests too. Then we have got the R&D initiatives at the national level, the innovation, national innovation plan, the innovation scheme. That's also very important with respect to the so-called R&D development issue. Currently, Prime Minister's office is closely monitoring with respect to new innovations. There are different opportunities to reach there. And if any good innovations with respect to Indian context, not necessarily there has to be very much high technology product, that is being searched by government, and if somebody has any idea, you can directly connect to their office. Actually, they will try to, see, evaluate. Obviously it will take their own way, but there are possibilities now. And then arranging funds for the BE, etc., they have already done it. And that's very important development by the government by forming BE and the state level SDS, state level designated agencies. Then assure availability of enough fuels and promoting major fuel switching with rationalizing of fuel prices with efficient fuel choice and substitution. In fact, this sentence, I've written it much earlier. Before the COVID, I have prepared this presentation, and I couldn't update these things. I think everything has become more relevant than that time when I included, because you can know that the last 2 to 3 years government has publicly declared, before that the planning was going on, to the two distinct directions of transport sector. One is the hydrogen economy. It's not only transport, it includes the other energy supply field also. And also the another is completely dedicated to the transport sector only, that's the electric vehicle, EV. So this two requirement came from basic requirement of or compulsion of importing the petroleum and fossil fuels from the countries. And this dependence has created the greater problem, big problem for our country. So unless you start planning from right now, you cannot solve the problem in next 10, 20 years. So obviously, government has taken up these two missions of fuel switching, what you call it. Fuel switching means petroleum fuel will be replaced by something else. It can be hydrogen, it can be electric vehicle. In an effect, the replacing electric vehicle by petroleum fuel can be considered as effectively a fuel switching principle. So government is trying to do that. And then obviously the efficient fuel choice comes as a part of that, and substitution is automatically will be there if you can establish that there is an efficient fuel choice. And recently, I don't know, I'm not sure, I found out that the even Tata has claimed, it may be a wrong claim, but it's very interesting information to me, because the electric vehicle has got the largest hindrance with respect to its price. As far as I have heard last time in Holdia seminar when I was there, actually the CSC has got their own electric vehicle, and that's the charging stations also. And one of the senior people came in that electric vehicle, and I was discussing with him. He was in the session also as one of my co-speaker. He was telling that electric vehicle, the price is not below 16 to 17 lakh, nothing was available as reported by him. But there was an in WhatsApp, I found out one message. Tata is coming up with one vehicle within 3 lakhs. I mean, they have named it EV Nano. I don't know whether it is true or not, but if it can happen, somehow any company can make it successful, then maybe the transformation to the electric vehicle may become a big issue. And then obviously the demand will come with respect to the charging stations and other things, and government has to parallelly plan with respect to not only the car supply of EV, but also the proper charging stations, like replacing all these petrol pumps. With respect to charging station is one challenge, because the people electricity availability will be in that way. And second part is very important, is those charging stations scheduling has to be there with respect to having no serious effect on the grid. Then the renewable integration will come into the system, because that's also fluctuating. In fact, we are seeking one, I mean, visit with respect to the PDCL, Power Development Corporation of West Bengal, and they have invited us, and we are looking one slot. If the blockchain-based mechanism can be implemented in fluctuations in both the demand and the generation, because generation will also be varying with a forecasting model, so that there is a, currently they also do in forecasting, because the generation section has to receive the forecasted data from the distributions and transmission and distribution section, and based on that generation make their generation schedule. It's a little bit, we are telling it's a little bit crude, at least our team with various scholars. We are suggesting that there should be a rather more micro level, not as a whole. That means at module level, they call it bus at the distribution point. At the bus level, if we can make it proper forecasting, then the forecasting will be much better, number one. And then it's called it load scheduling. Scheduling, not shedding. Scheduling means the power supply to different places must be distributed in such a way so that, according to expectation, no bus will be provided with more power than it requires, but with a proper margin, because making some precise estimations of the demand is a very important issue of the energy supply efficiency. Anyway, let's see how they react with that, and blockchain can somehow help in making that particular proposition successful. So let's see if they accept it, we can do something, but obviously it will not be implemented immediately, but they can provide us some data for publication. That's the idea. So accelerating power sector reforms and rationalizations of power tariff. This rationalization of power tariff is every year in Electricity Act it is discussed. But unfortunately, as far as I have seen, it's very difficult with respect to the political pressure. Because if any government wants to increase the, which is the very obvious rationalization, industrial sector power tariff must be reduced, agricultural sector power tariff must be increased, but no government can do it of their own, because if there is something such decision is taken, then there will be some, always the oppositions are there to take the political mileage. So how it can be done, whether in a very small incremental way or something, that's the people are there who can decide. But this rationalization of power tariff is very important, because unless we can reach to the agricultural sector almost free of cost power whatever they are enjoying, that also causing, anything free means that will be, I mean, very misused. And in that case, the overall energy efficiency of the government or national level will be affected.
So we can then,
हाँ,
sir,
हमारा
so we can then say that inherently the all the influence conservation system is impacted by the governmental parties and all those, because anything we are making it is influenced by them. Basically, we all have some certain opposition at every time.
what is your name, bhai?
So Ayush.
Ayush. I can tell you that it's absolutely true. It's not only true in India, because we have a general tendency of criticizing our leaders. It is absolutely true in all over the world. And which is true and which is not, nobody can say. Angela Merkel, German Chancellor, she has been recognized and she has got the full terms as per their constitution, most probably consecutively 2 terms or 3 terms, I forgot it. And I don't know whether you have seen that video when she has to rather step down, because as per the constitution she cannot be any more term as the chancellor. And there was a 10 minutes clapping for her of the audience. So the leaders, they, if, and Germany has got significant growth under her leadership. So who is successful, who is not, it's very difficult to say. But I can tell you, all the in Britain there was severe leadership crisis. Currently, we are happy with Rishi Sunak, but three of their prime ministers couldn't get even survive successively in that particular political structure. So don't think that these political issues are very easy going scenario in other advanced countries too. UK has got several limitations with respect to economic growth and many other issues. So combining these facts, this is what you are telling is true. But do you say that you can come out of the democracy? You cannot. So if you have to survive, the Indian strength is very mostly coming from the with so much diversity of religion, I mean social practice, language. We have our very good strength at international level just because we could maintain our very steady democracy. So this minor issue of agricultural tariff should not be the reason of changing our democracy. But whenever democracy will be there, democratic election system will be there, and taking advantage and misusing that will also be there. So we cannot lose patience. We have to carry with that, and let's see how it survives. Anyway, so whatever you have told, it's true, but we cannot just leave our democracy for a reason of reforming the electricity tariff. Okay, thank you.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Thank you. Promoting renewable energy is an important issue. We always can do that, and that's being done. In fact, we have some plan with PDCL to proposing some distributed renewable energy. They have already started working that. We have also some research work, but research work doesn't always tell that it will be accepted as a policy because the hardware implementation also has to be there, and then ensuring energy security through different proactive measures. And in fact, I can tell that the hydrogen economy and the EV selection as the future plan is undoubtedly these two proactive plans. So, these are the issues related to the integrated energy policy. Today, I just rather made a story out of it. I didn't go into any dictation sort of thing. So, whatever the most important parts you find out, rather the understand why the integrated energy policy is required rather than only energy conservation, because there are conflicting issues of different sectors, and whenever the government come at the national level, I mean at state level also there are such issues within the state, but government at the national level has to balance the different challenges and develop an integrated policy, and for that whatever is needed they must be combined in a structured way. And that's why so many ministries, as I've just drawn with the purple color, or rather they put into the purple color, etc., even more, some more may be partially affected, are related to the so-called integrated energy policy. So with this, the few major initiatives as I have discussed, yes, government has taken good initiatives. Then availability and enough fuels and fuel switching has become the most important part. And that, as Ayush has mentioned, that although acceleration of reforms and rationalization of tariff is a target, but that's getting affected because hydrogen economy and EV is not affecting the political other political parties directly. They can criticize later on if it fails, but whenever it goes to the public interest, say whenever there is only 1 rupee enhancement of a public commodity like gas, cooking gas, etc., how many people go on shouting? But whenever it's a several crores of investment with respect to hydrogen economy, then obviously nobody can get directly affected, and the even opposition political parties also cannot just find out some issues they can use for instigating people. That's democracy. We have to accept it also. Anyway, and renewable energy and proactive measures are also important issues. Any queries up to this? Okay, if not, then I can come out of the presentation and then go for the roll call. Okay, there are few people, so it will be quick. I can have my dinner then. Acha, Bishwajyoti, acho.